Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be talking about binary files. You must have seen the previous two videos. There, we were concentrating on text files. In today's video, we are going to be learning about binary files. I've already explained the difference between text files and binary files in the introductory session. Okay, so we directly get into binary files, see what do you mean by binary files, how do you open binary files, how do you process elements in a binary file. Is that clear? Okay, so let me just share my screen with you. Okay, so in this chapter or in this particular video, what are we going to be learning about binary files? We are going to revisit the file access modes that we have already learned with text files, but with a slight difference here. We will again be talking about how to open and close files. I will be introducing a new module called the Pickle Module, which is exactly helping us to write and read something from a binary file. And you will also learn in this video, how do you write something to a binary file and how do you read something from a binary file. So these are the 5 things that we'll be learning or talking about in this particular video. Okay, so let's go to the file access modes. We've already learned file access modes as read mode, write mode, append mode, read and write mode, all that, but we learned it with text files. The modes are almost the same, only thing is every mode is followed by the letter B, which represents it as a binary file. So in previous cases, when we were opening text file in read mode, we only wrote the access mode as R. Now, if I'm opening a binary file in read mode, I need to write RB. So the B that you see here in all the access modes is representing a binary file. Now, in text files, we learned that if you don't write any mode, by default, it is R. But in binary files, there is no default mode. So if you want to do the read mode, you will have to write RB. R was the only default mode file opening the file. Any other mode of text file or all the modes of binary file, you will need to specify the access mode while opening the file. Is that clear? So we have the RB mode for read only, WB mode for write only, AB mode for append. Append is basically writing, and if you remember, append means don't delete the previous contents, just continue with the existing contents. Then RB plus if you want to read and write, WB plus if you want to write and read, and AB plus if you want to append and read. Is that clear? So these were already discussed. The discussion about them is exactly the same. The only difference is previously we were talking about R, W, A, R plus, W plus, they were all access modes related to text files. Here, these are the access modes related to binary file. So the same access modes like the text file, but they are followed by the letter B. Is that clear? Okay. So the next thing we need to know is how do we open and close files? If you have seen the previous video, you would have already learned how do we open and close files. We make use of a function named as open for opening files and close for closing files. Only the difference here is the file name that you specify here is going to be treated as a binary file and not as a text file. Otherwise, the syntax, everything remains the same. So look at the example. I wrote fin, that's my file input. It's an object name, is equal to open student.dat. Now, why dat? Previously, you used to write txt. This is just the way of writing a binary file. Basically, binary files can have any extension, okay? But in terms of programming, when we talk about programming and when we talk about binary files, we prefer to give the extension as DAT. And WB is the access mode. WB means what? I am planning to open this file in write mode. Similarly, in the how do you close a particular file after you've finished using it? You will write the object name dot close. When you write the object name dot close, it means you're planning to close the files. All the resources attached with the file is now going to be released. Is that clear? I hope the opening, the closing, and the access modes are clear. Now let me introduce you to the Pickle module. Like you had the statistic module or the random module or the math module, which was already a built-in module. You have a module named as the Pickle module. Now it is this module that helps me to write or to read from a binary file. Now from this module, we are going to be concentrating on two functions. The first function being dump. Now what does this dump function do? It writes an object to a binary file. Now what do you mean by an object? Your object can be an integer, your object can be a float, can be a string, a list, a tuple, a dictionary, whatever. All the kinds of data that you have used in Python programming, all those kinds of data can be used as an object while using the dump method. Okay, so what does the dump method do? Look at the syntax and I will explain to you later. When you say pickle.dump, now why pickle.dump? Because dump is a function of a module named as pickle. So when we used sqrt, we wrote math.sqrt, right? When we use random function of the random module, we wrote random.random. So similarly, when we are using the dump method or the dump function, we are using the name of the module, which is pickle.dump. Now this method of this function takes two parameters. The first parameter is the data that you wish to write to the file. Now, is your data numeric or float or complex or list? That doesn't matter. Where is the data stored and what do you want to write to the file? That is going to be represented by the word object. Then what is the file object then? We have learned that when we speak about file objects, it is the object that connects me to a particular file. For example, in our all text file programs, you remember me writing f in, f out. So those were the file objects. And remember, the only time you write the file name is while you're opening the file. Once you have opened the file, nowhere in your program did you specify the file name. Then how did you get connected to the file? Is by means of the object that was used to open the file. I'm talking about that object when I say file object. So don't get confused between this object and the file object. File object is, suppose you had written fin is equal to open and whatever after it, okay? The file object here is fin because fin is connecting me to that particular file. Whereas this object here is talking about the variable in your program that has the data which you plan to write to that particular file. Okay, you will understand with an example. I have read admission number into a variable called ADMNO. So I've asked the user to give me an admission number and he's entered an admission number into a variable called ADMNO. Now what do I want to do? I want to transfer whatever is in ADMNO into a particular file, whichever file I have opened. So how do I transfer or how do I write something to a file is by making use of the dump function. If I compare it to text files, in text files you made use of the write and the write lines function to transfer text to a text file. Whereas here we'll be making use of a function named as dump. Now, what do you want to dump? You want to dump the admission number. Where do you want to dump? You want to dump the admission number into the file which is connected by your file object named as fout. I've not written a complete program here. Obviously, before I transfer something to the file, I would have to open the file. So I've not written a complete program here. I will show you the complete program a little later. And as of now, I'm just explaining the dump function. So what is the dump function doing? What do you want to store is the first parameter. Where do you want to store is the second parameter. So fout is not where you want to store. Fout is connecting me to a file. I want to store data in that particular file. Clear? Is the dump function clear? The second function that we're going to learn about the from the Pickle module is the load function. Now, what does the load function do? I can say it does the reverse of dump. What was dump doing? From the variable, which is in primary memory, contents were transferred to secondary memory. that is your file. What is the load function going to do? From the secondary memory, which is your file, it's going to transfer data into your primary memory, which means into your variables. So load is exactly the reverse of dump. Dump was to write an object to a binary file. Load is to read an object from a binary file. And what is the syntax of the method called, or the function called load? You write pickle.load because load belongs to the module called pickle. Write the name of the file object from where you plan to read. That means this file object is going to be connecting me to a file. So which file am I talking about? Write the correct file object. And what happens with the load function? Whatever it reads from the binary file, it will be storing it in this variable that you have specified here. So it means pick up from the file. So this is your file, let's say. Pick up the data from the file and put it into the variable that you have specified here. Now, one very interesting thing that you need to know about binary files and about dump is when dump stores the data, it just doesn't store the data, it also stores the structure of the data. Means what? If I stored 1, 2, 3, 4, which was an admission number, it will not just store 1, 2, 3, 4. It will also store the structure of the data, which means 1, 2, 3, 4 is an integer. That's the structure of the data. If I was storing the name of an employee, let's say Pooja, so it's not just Pooja that is going to be stored. Along with the data, it will also store the structure which says it's a string. So when you dump a string first, then when you read first, that means when you load first, you are going to be getting a string and there is no change to it. So let's assume I dumped an admission number, which was an integer. Next, I dumped a name. Next, I dumped a percentage, which was float. Okay. So the first load will return me the admission number, which is an integer. The second load will return me a string, which is the name. And the third load will return me the percentage, which is a float. So what you dump is what is going to get loaded. The load is going to work in the exact order of how the dump was done. Is that clear? So how do I show you an example? If I had opened the file and if I said pickle.load fin is my file object. You remember in the previous example, we just loaded one admission number. That admission number, which the user had entered and which you loaded into the file is now, or dumped into the file, is going to be loaded or taken from the file and stored in variable ANO in my program. And then later on, what am I doing? I am displaying ANO. So I'm displaying the admission number. So are these two functions clear? Dump works like write and write lines of text file, transferring data to the binary file. Load works like read line or read lines of a text file, that is transferring data from the text file into your variable in the program so that you can do some calculations or just display it. In this scenario, I have just loaded the admission number and displayed it to the user. Is that clear? Okay. So now what we are going to learn is the previous example only loaded one data, dumped only one data, and this example is loading only one data. What if we have admission number, name and salary and many things about many people? Then how does the load and how does the dump work? We will look at it soon. Extremely hot at our place, so I had to get my hair tied. Okay, so let's look at a program where we are planning to write something to a binary file and read something from a binary file. So the first function here, it's asking me to write the employee number, name, salary and department to a binary file after taking it from the user. And the name of the binary file given to me in the question is emp.dat. Then it's asking me to do another thing, is to read the contents of the binary file and to display it on screen. Okay, so let's make things a little faster. Okay, I am writing a function. So I write a function. Now step by step, just pay attention. The first thing that you need to do is whenever you want to write something to a file or read something from the file, step number 1, import the pickle module. So I write import pickle. Okay. After importing the Pickle module, second thing you need to do is open the file in the correct mode. I'm trying to write something to the file, so I write fout is equal to open emp.dat, and because I'm opening a write mode, I'm writing WB and it's a binary file. After opening the file, you have to get the contents from the user. So I need to read employee number, name, salary, and department. Okay, so let me just fast read all these things from the user, okay, with our regular statements. Okay, I've got the employee number. Let's say name is equal to, I know the data type is going to be a string, enter name. So I get the name, then I have salary, so I write, and salary could be float, so I write that, and I read enter salary. Okay, I got the salary from the user. Now I need to know his department. So DEPT is equal to department. We're assuming here would be sales, marketing, accounts. So it's a string. So input, enter department, and I've taken the department into DEPT. Now I want to, so first step was import the module. Second is open the file in the correct mode. Third is get the data from the user. So I've got the data from the user. Step number 4 says write it to the file. Which function helps me to write to the file? Function named as dump. So I'm going to make use of it. So pickle.dump, okay. What is the first thing I want to dump? KLE. What is the first thing I want to dump is the employee number. So I write ENO into which file? The file object is fout. Okay, I'm just going to, okay, dump 4 times because I have 4 elements to be written to the file. First was ENO, then was name, then is salary, and then I have DEPT. Okay, so I have got everything dumped, that means written to the file. Okay, and after that, what can I do? I can just close the file. So I write fout.close. Okay. Now, if I stop here, then this program is only reading the employee number, the name, the salary, and the department once, and transferring everything to that particular file, okay? But what if I wanted to read many employee numbers, many names, salaries, and departments? Then in that scenario, what you could do is the dumping and the reading, you could put it into a loop. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be, you just write this function for doing it once, and anytime you want to add more employees, you keep calling that function. But in that scenario, remember, you will have to change the opening mode to AB, because if you write WB, then every time you open, the old contents will be lost. Okay, so I'm just going to be writing a loop. Now here, randomly, I'm assuming that what if I want to, write the employee number, name, and department of 3 employees. So I write for I in range 3. Okay. Now this is specific, okay, 3. You could ask the user n and use n instead of 3, or you could use a while loop asking the user, do you wish to add more records, concept, okay, anything. Either of the ways, it is going to be fine. Okay, so now this function is ready for writing something to a file, but the function, having the function itself is of no use unless and until we don't call the function. So let me just call the function. Okay, so I've called the function. Now remember, I've written a loop which executes 3 times. Just assuming that I'm going to be writing the details of 3 employees. If you wanted to do it for n employees, replace range 3 by range n, and in the function before the loop, just ask the user enter the value of n. Is that clear? Okay. So let's just run the program. Okay, it's asking me for employee number. I entered 1. It's asking me for name. Let's say I enter Tina. It's asking me for salary. I enter 200. It's asking me for department. And let's say I enter accounts. Okay, now this is going back to the loop once again. It's asking me for the next employee number, the next name, the next salary, and the next department. Okay, so let's say this person is in the sales department, then the next employee number need not be in order. The next name, let's say Pooja, the next salary, let's say 550, and the next department, let's say sales once again. Okay, and now it's not going to be asking me any further, but it didn't show me any output. That is because you just said write it to the file. So it has taken the data and we assume that it's written to the file. Now in text files, I would open the text file and actually show you whether the writing took place. Now here in binary files, even if I open emp.dat, you wouldn't be able to read any contents of emp.dat because binary files are not readable. We have already learned about this in the initial videos of files. Okay, so I cannot read a binary file directly from any text editor. Then how do I know whether writing took place? Okay, good. We will go to the second method. What is the second method asking me to do? To read the contents of the file. So now if I read the contents of the file and if I get back everything that I have stored, that means writing is taking place, right? So let me call the function reading. Okay, here also when you're doing reading, step 1 is to import the Pickle module. Now you won't import anything twice, it has already been imported. Second is you open the file in input mode or read mode. So fn is equal to open. What was the file name given? emp.dat, and because it's in read mode, I need to write RB. There is no default mode. So import the module, steps of reading. Import the module, open the file, read from the file. Read from the file means which function am I going to be using? The load function. Okay, so I'm going to be using the load function for reading from the file. Okay, I'm just copy pasting this so it can reduce a lot of work for me. So I'm just going to read it into all these variables. Okay, but now I'm not getting it from the user, I'm getting it from the file. How do you get something from the file we learned? Pickle.load and the object that is connecting me to the file. Okay, so the same thing I have to write multiple times. For name, so I write Control V, then for salary, Control V, okay, salary and DPT, okay, and here again I write Control V. Now the order here has to be maintained because if employee number is the first thing that you dump, then obviously employee number is the first thing that you're going to read. Okay, because I told you what you dump is what you load. Okay, now if I do this, what will happen is it will open the file, read the first employee number, the first name, the first salary, the first DPT, and that's it. But we have written multiple records, right? Now in this scenario, we know it's 3. So we could do that in a loop 3 times. But generally when we are reading files, do we know how many records are there in the file? No. So then what can I do? Okay, I can do something like this, and this is very interesting and very important. Okay, and I will explain to you what I'm doing. I write while true. So again, I'm writing a kind of an infinite loop here, and I am loading it into these variables. After loading it into the variables, I have to display it to the user. So I display it to the user by saying print eno, comma, ne, comma, sal, comma, dept. So whatever I've read from the file, it is going to be displayed. Now when you say while true, it's an infinite loop. So then when should this stop? Okay, now if you remember what I said with text files, read and read line function. When it can't read anything further, it would return an empty string. Now what happens with load is, if it can't read anything further, it issues an error called the Eof error. So your program stops functioning and you get an error called the Eof error. So if you keep loading, you remember I was talking about the record pointer being moved? When the record pointer reaches the end of file, that is towards the end, and there is nothing more to read, and if your program has issued a load, then it gives me a Eof error. Now I want to, and once I get an error means what? I'm stuck with my program. The program execution cannot continue. So what do? There is a mechanism called the try except mechanism, which is an error handling mechanism. I could make use of that in my program. And how do I do it? I will show it to you and then explain it to you one line at a time. Okay, I write try and then I write except. Except stands for exception. Eof Error colon, and then I write pass. Now let me just explain to you what happens. The load function will keep reading for you, but then it doesn't tell me when it has reached the end of file and I can't read any further. Because if it has reached the end of file and if I try issuing a load once again, the load function gives me an error. When the load function gives me an error, it means my program execution is going to stop. Okay, I don't want that to happen. So what do? I use this load and this print everything in an exceptional handling mechanism. You will not be actually learning exceptional handling mechanism in your syllabus. It was there in the previous one, but this year, I mean this time onwards, they've removed that exceptional handling mechanism, but you would need to know it if you're using reading for binary files. So what exactly does this try and catch, try and accept do? I'll just diagrammatically show you. Try means what? Try out all these lines. Okay, and if you come across an error, or errors are also called exceptions, while executing the program, if you come across an error, then what you do is come to the code saying except and check, is it a Eof error? See, there could be many errors in our program, right? But here, the only error that I'm going to get while reading from the file is the Eof error. That means I've reached the end of file. So in this scenario, what happens? Try all those lines. So keep reading, keep reading, keep reading. Once the record pointer reaches the end of file and load function tries to read from end of file, it will come across an error called the Eof error. When it comes across an error called the Eof error, it comes to this particular line which says except Eof with a colon. And whatever you have written under this is the statement that will be executed. The statement pass says nothing. Pass means pass it on, do nothing. So that is kind of a statement which actually does nothing. But suppose when I reach the end of file and you wanted to give a message to the user saying that there is nothing more to be read, instead of writing pass, you could have written print, there is nothing more to be read, or file over, or file, whatever. Okay, there's nothing to read, file over, that's your message. I don't want to give any message. I just want to read as long as it can read. And if it cannot read, don't do nothing. So do nothing means the pass statement. Is that clear? And after that, I will have to close my file. So I have to close the file. So I write fin.close. Okay, now I'm going to be calling. Now I won't be calling the writing function. We've already seen the writing function. Let me just call the reading function. Okay, but before that, let me just clear the annotations and explain to you the reading function once again. Okay, now, when you're reading from the file, the first step you need to do is import the Pickle module. I have already done that. After that, open the file in read mode. This is opening the file in read mode. After that, get the data from the file using which function? Load. So I got the data. After that, you print the data. But then this would only get the first record and print the first record. What if I have to keep reading all the records and I'm not actually aware of how many records are there? But in that scenario, we can put all these lines into a try except, exception handling mechanism. In this case, what happens is it says, try all these lines. That means load and print and load and print and load and print as long as it is error-free. When will you come across an error? When you reach the end of file. When you reach the end of file and if you come across Eof error, then the program's execution comes to this line and continues further. Next line says pass, do nothing. So it comes to the next line and it closes the file. Okay, so now if I run this program, I'll exactly come to know whether our writing had worked perfectly. Clear? Okay, so let's just run the program. Okay, can you see whatever we wrote previously to the file gets displayed here. Now, did you get an EOF error? No. If you hadn't written the try except, then the minute it reached Pooja's, the minute it finished reading Pooja's record, it would have given you an error here. So suppose I had some more lines to be done or some more functions to be done in the program, it would all get interrupted. So instead of that, I'm making use of the try except exceptional handling mechanism. Is that clear? So now I hope writing to the file and reading from the file is okay with you. Now, before I leave today, I would want to tell you something. Here, I was writing employee number, name, sal, and department as 4 different variables. If you store the employee number, name, sal, and department as a list, then you had to dump only once. That means your list contained employee number, name, sal, and department. Then you had to only dump it once. Similarly, if it was a dictionary, you would only have to dump it once. Similarly, while loading also. Okay, just to show you an example, I'm just going to be creating a list, and you can try the dictionary part on your own. Suppose I have a list called E. Okay, it's a list. And then what do I do? Or instead of creating an empty list, I write here E is equal to, and what does E consist of? ENO, comma, NA, comma, SAL, comma, DEPT. So now where is the entire record stored? In my list named as E. Now I can just dump that. I write pickle.dump in bracket E, comma, where you want to dump. So that's with F out. Okay. So while reading also, you had to just do this. And no need of doing all this. No need of displaying so many things. Just display E. So remember, because what you dump is what you load, I said. So if you dump a list, then you're loading a list. Let's run this program, both the writing and the reading function, and let's see whether it's working fine for us. Okay, so I am going to be reading all the things, but I'm going to put it into a list and dump the list. Similarly, I'm going to be reading the list. Okay, so let's just run the program. Okay, employee number 1, name ASD, salary 100, department sales. Okay, second employee name QWE, salary 200, department, let's say accounts. Third employee name RTY, salary 300, and department, let's say sales. Okay, so can you see the first part was the writing part and the second part was the reading part. Now you got it as a list. So what you dump is what you get. So if you dump instead of a list, if it was a tuple, you would get back a tuple. Instead of a tuple, if it was a dictionary, if you dump a dictionary, you will get back a dictionary. Is that clear? So I hope the writing and the reading to a binary file is clear. Individual, because I said the object that you're dumping could be an integer, could be a float, could be a string, could be a list, could be a dictionary, could be anything. But you have to remember is what you dump is what you're going to load. So that has to be kept in mind. Is that clear? I hope the writing and the reading to a binary file is clear. Next video, we will learn how to search for something in a file, how do you delete something from a file, how do you modify, and so on. But for all of them, I would need the writing and the reading function. So in all those programs, I would write this and keep it as it is, because I think by now you know how to write and read, and I'll only concentrate on the searching function or the deletion function or modification function. Clear? I hope things are clear with you. Okay? Okay, thank you.